A vet rescued a German Shepherd from dying. 1 year later, he returns to save her life. On a stormy night, she pulled a half-dead dog from the roadside, never imagining that saving him would put her in danger. A year later, as thunder splits the sky, the same dog appears again, bleeding, terrified, and moments before her clinic explodes. Someone wants her gone. But why? The deeper she looks, the more she realizes this dog isn't just loyal. He's hiding the key to a deadly secret powerful men would kill to bury. Now hunted, with only the animal she once saved to protect her, she must uncover the truth before it's too late. Who tried to burn her alive? And what dark secret did this dog survive to expose? Drop a comment below and share which part of the world you're tuning in from today. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more. The sleet hammered against Laurel Keating's windshield as she drove home along the dark country road. Her worn wipers squeaked across the glass, barely keeping up with the icy mix falling from the November sky. The Blue Ridge Mountains loomed like black shadows against the cloudy night, their familiar outline nearly invisible in the storm. Her headlights caught a flash of movement. There, in the ditch, something large and dark stumbled through the frozen grass. Laurel's foot instinctively hit the brake, her old pickup truck sliding slightly before coming to a stop on the wet asphalt. "Oh no," she whispered, squinting through the precipitation. A German Shepherd, massive and clearly injured, limped along the roadside. His sable coat was matted with mud and ice. Without hesitation, Laurel grabbed the emergency kit she always kept behind her seat and stepped out into the freezing rain. "Hey there, big guy," she called softly, approaching with careful steps. "It's okay. I'm here to help." The dog's amber eyes fixed on her, alert and intelligent despite his obvious pain. He didn't growl or retreat. Instead, he watched her with an almost human awareness that made her pause. "You're hurt pretty bad, aren't you?" Laurel knelt slowly, holding out her hand. The shepherd limped forward, letting her see the extent of his injuries. Deep scars marked his flank, not fresh but not fully healed either. "Let's get you somewhere warm and dry." To her surprise, the dog followed her commands easily, climbing into her truck without resistance. 20 minutes later, they arrived at her small veterinary clinic, really just a converted farmhouse with basic equipment, but it was enough for emergency care. Under the bright lights of her exam room, Laurel got her first good look at her patient. The German Shepherd was powerfully built, but thin, his coat dull from exposure. The scarring on his flank looked like blast damage. She'd seen similar injuries in working dogs before. But what really caught her attention was his microchip scan. Completely blank. "That's not possible," she muttered, running, the scanner again. Microchips didn't just erase themselves. Someone had deliberately wiped this dog's history clean. The clinic's front door chimed, making her jump. Harlan Deeks, the county shelter director, filled the doorframe with his bulk. His thin hair was plastered to his head from the sleet, and his perpetual sheen of sweat hadn't been deterred by the cold. "Dr. Keating," he said, forcing a smile that didn't reach his darting eyes. "I got a call about a stray pickup." Laurel straightened, positioning herself between Deeks and her patient. "He's injured and needs medical care. I'm putting him on a temporary hold for treatment." "Now you know the policy on strays," Deeks said, his voice oily with false concern. With his injuries and unknown history, immediate euthanasia would be the most cost-effective solution. The German Shepherd's ears flattened, but he remained perfectly still on the exam table, watching Deeks with unnerving focus. "He's stable and responding well," Laurel countered. "There's no medical reason for euthanasia." "The liability alone," Deeks began, but was interrupted by another arrival. Deputy Calder Boone ducked through the door, bringing in a blast of cold air. His broad shoulders filled out his tan uniform, and his dark blonde hair was dusted with melting sleet. The half-healed scar along his jawline stood out in the fluorescent lighting. "Evening, folks," he said, his voice quiet but carrying natural authority. "Got a call about a welfare check?" "Deputy," Deke said quickly, "this stray needs to be processed according to county guidelines." "I'm seeing a medical hold situation," Boone interrupted, studying the shepherd with experienced eyes. "Military working dog, if I had to guess. Those are blast scars." Laurel nodded. "Someone wiped his chip clean. He needs care and evaluation." Boone pulled out his notebook, already writing. "I'll sign off on a temporary medical hold. Once he's stable, we can look into search and rescue placement. Department's always looking for dogs with proper training." The relief that flooded through Laurel made her knees weak. "Thank you, Deputy." Deeks opened his mouth to protest, but Boone's steady gaze made him think better of it. With a tight nod, the shelter director retreated into the sleeting night. Over the next days, the shepherd's true nature emerged. He responded to commands Laurel had never given, demonstrating the kind of discipline that only came from professional training. His wounds healed clean, and his coat regained its luster under proper care. As winter's grip slowly loosened, Laurel filed his intake under the most generic label possible. She couldn't shake the feeling that someone had gone to great lengths to erase this dog's past, but at least now he had a future. The sheriff's search and rescue unit welcomed him with open arms, recognizing his exceptional training. Spring brought new growth to the Blue Ridge Mountains, and with it came a fragile peace. But on quiet nights, Laurel found herself wondering about the mysterious shepherd and the secrets locked behind those knowing amber eyes. Through her exam room window, she could see him training with the rescue unit in the distance, his powerful form scaling obstacle courses with natural grace. Whatever his past held, he had found his place here, a reminder that sometimes the best thing you could do was simply offer shelter from the storm and trust that better days would follow. The late summer storm rolled across the Blue Ridge Mountains like an angry giant, bringing darkness hours before sunset. Thunder crashed overhead as rain lashed against the windows of Laurel's clinic, where she worked late catching up on paperwork. The power had been flickering all afternoon, casting uncertain shadows through the old farmhouse-turned-veterinary practice. A year had passed since that sleeting November night when she'd found the German shepherd in the ditch. She thought of him often, watching his progress with the sheriff's K-9 unit from afar. He'd flourished there, earning a reputation as one of their most reliable search and rescue dogs. The lights sputtered again, then died completely. Laurel sighed, reaching for the emergency flashlight she kept in her desk drawer. The backup generator should kick in any second for the critical systems, but the familiar hum never came. Through the drumming rain, she heard scratching at the front door. Urgent, desperate. Then a familiar bark that made her heart skip. "What in the world?" she muttered, swinging her flashlight beam toward the entrance. Through the glass, she saw him, the German shepherd, soaked to the skin and clearly agitated. Blood matted the fur around his shoulder. Laurel rushed to unlock the door. "How did you get here? The kennel's 5 miles away." The dog burst inside, but instead of seeking attention or treatment, he circled her legs with single-minded focus, herding her towards the back of the clinic. His ears were flat against his skull, muscles coiled with tension. "Hey, easy boy," Laurel said, trying to get a better look at his injury. "Let me check that shoulder." The shepherd wouldn't let her stop. He kept pushing, increasingly frantic, steering her away from the drug storage room. The air felt wrong, heavy with something beyond the storm's electricity. Then she heard it. A soft, mechanical click from the storeroom, The shepherd lunged, his powerful body slamming into her legs just as the world exploded into light and heat. The force of his impact drove them through the back door's emergency bar as a rolling wave of fire roared down the hallway they'd just vacated. They tumbled onto wet grass as windows shattered overhead, spraying glass. The shepherd's body covered hers, shielding her from the debris. Heat bloomed against her back as flames climbed into the rainy night. Laurel lay there, stunned, the dog's wet fur pressed against her face as sirens began to wail in the distance. Mind struggled to process what had just happened. The shepherd remained alert above her, scanning the darkness beyond the firelight. Deputy Calder Boone's cruiser was first on scene, sliding to a stop in the gravel lot. He sprinted through the rain, his face tight with concern. "Laurel, are you hurt?" She tried to sit up, but everything ached. "I'm okay. The shepherd. He got me out." Fire trucks arrived, their red lights painting the rain crimson. Crews deployed hoses, attacking the blaze from multiple angles. The shepherd wouldn't leave Laurel's side, even when paramedics approached to check her over. "Ma'am, you've got some nasty bruising starting," one EMT said, examining where the dog had impacted her legs. "But it probably saved your life. Another few seconds in that hallway." Calder crouched beside them under the ambulance's awning, his uniform dark with rain. He broke out of the canine kennel somehow. Handler found the door torn clean off its hinges. He reached out slowly, letting the shepherd sniff his hand. "Good boy. You knew, didn't you?" The dog's eyes never stopped scanning their surroundings, his posture alert despite his own injury. The blood on his shoulder turned out to be superficial, likely from his escape from the kennel. Fire investigators worked through the night. By dawn, they had preliminary findings. Calder brought the report directly to Laurel, who sat wrapped in a blanket in her truck, the shepherd still steadfast beside her. "It was deliberate," Calder said quietly, showing her photos of a device's remains. "Chemical signature matches 2 other accidents in the county over the past year. Both were written off as equipment malfunctions." His jaw tightened. Not anymore. Laurel stared at the smoking ruins of her clinic. The fire had been contained to the central portion of the building, but water and smoke damage reached everywhere. Through the broken windows, she could see the destroyed drug storage room, her entire inventory reduced to ash. "Who would do this?" she whispered. "I'm just a rural vet. I don't have enemies. I barely have competing practices within 50 miles. Someone thought you were worth targeting." Calder studied the shepherd, who had positioned himself between them and the parking lot entrance. And somehow he knew. Broke out, ran 5 miles in a thunderstorm, and got you out just in time. The dog's ears twitched at every passing car, every distant sound. His previous training was fully evident now. This wasn't just a search and rescue dog. He'd been something else before. Something that recognized threats and knew exactly how to respond. "What am I going to do?" Laurel's voice cracked. "Insurance will take weeks to process. I have patients who need care, without inventory, without facilities." The weight of it all pressed down on her chest. Years of building her practice, of earning the community's trust, threatened to crumble like the charred walls of her clinic. "First things first," Calder said, his voice gentle but firm. "You're not staying alone until we figure out what's going on. I'm calling in some favors, getting a security detail." The shepherd growled softly, making both of them look down. "Okay," Calder amended with a hint of a smile. "A secondary security detail. Looks like your primary guardian has already appointed himself." The dog pressed against Laurel's legs, his presence solid and reassuring. She remembered that night a year ago, when she'd fought to save him from euthanasia. Now he had returned the favor in the most dramatic way possible, transforming from a rescued stray into her literal lifesaver. Dawn painted the mountains in pale gold as emergency crews began clearing the scene. The storm had passed, but Laurel could feel another one gathering on her horizon. Someone had tried to destroy her life's work, maybe even end her life. The only question was, why? The shepherd's warm weight against her legs anchored her to the present moment. Whatever came next, she wasn't facing it alone. She had a guardian now, one who had already proven he would run through storms and burst through flames to keep her safe. The morning after the fire, arson investigators swarmed over Laurel's clinic like ants on spilled sugar. Their careful documentation revealed a pattern that sent chills down her spine. The accelerant wasn't just any chemical. It matched traces found at 2 other accidental fires in the county over the past 18 months. Both properties were bought by Crowell Quarries within weeks of the incidents, Calder explained, spreading photos across the hood of his cruiser. Way below market value, given the circumstances. Laurel leaned closer, the shepherd a steady presence at her side. Baxter Crowell, the quarry magnate? The very same. Calder's expression hardened. He's been buying up land all along this stretch. There's talk of a rail spur project, would cut transport costs to his processing facilities by 60%. The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. My clinic. It's right where that line would need to run, isn't it? Last piece of the puzzle. Calder nodded grimly. Your property bridges the gap between his existing holdings. Before Laurel could process this revelation, a familiar car pulled into what remained of her parking lot. Harlan Deeks stepped out, his suit impeccable despite the early hour. The shepherd's demeanor changed instantly. His ears flattened, and a low growl rumbled in his chest. Now, Deeks said, holding up his hands. I'm here to help, Laurel. This is a terrible situation, but we can make it right. The dog's growl deepened. Laurel remembered that same response from the night she'd first found him. That instinctive distrust of the shelter director. She'd dismissed it then as anxiety from injury. Now she wondered if it meant something more. I've already spoken with your insurance company, Deeks continued, pulling out a leather portfolio. They're prepared to fast-track your claim, and I happen to know of several excellent properties outside the county where you could relocate. Fresh start, modern facilities. That's mighty convenient, Calder interrupted, his tone deceptively casual. Insurance companies aren't usually so accommodating. Neither is the county planning board with new clinic permits. Deeks' smile tightened. I'm just trying to help a valued member of our community. While they talked, Laurel's phone buzzed with urgent messages from clients. Reality crashed back in. She had animals depending on her. I need to figure out immediate arrangements, she said. I've got 3 boarding cases that need monitoring, and somewhere in that mess are all my patient records. I can help coordinate temporary placements, Calder offered. The K-9 unit has connections with several boarding facilities. The next hours blurred into a marathon of logistics. Laurel worked the phones, arranging transfers for her patients, while salvage crews carefully extracted what they could from the less damaged areas of the clinic. The shepherd stayed close, his body language remaining tense whenever Deeks approached with another helpful suggestion about quick sales and relocation options. Around noon, Calder pulled her aside, his face grave. Just got word. Tom Wesley was run off Mountain Creek Road last night. He's in intensive care. The county safety inspector? Laurel's stomach dropped. What happened? Brake lines were cut. Clean job, professional. Calder lowered his voice. He'd been looking into some irregular code approvals on recent property transfers, all involving Crowell's acquisitions. The pressure built throughout the day. More calls came, not just from worried clients, but from real estate agents representing unnamed buyers. Each time, The shepherd's ears would prick forward, his attention razor-sharp on Laurel's reactions. As evening approached, Deeks made one final attempt. "Be reasonable, Laurel. This location is compromised now. Why rebuild here when you could start fresh somewhere else? I have a buyer willing to take it off your hands today, as is." The shepherd's growl was barely audible, but Laurel felt it through her legs where he pressed against her. She thought about Tom Wesley in the hospital, about the pattern of convenient accidents and quick sales, about how this loyal dog had somehow known to save her life. "I need time to consider my options," she said firmly. "This is my life's work, not just a property deal." Deeks's pleasant mask slipped for just a moment. "Time isn't always on our side, my dear. Opportunities have a way of going up in smoke." After he left, Calder helped Laurel secure the building's remaining entrances. "I'm posting a patrol car overnight," he said, "and I've got calls into some people who might be interested in Crowell's pattern of acquisitions." Laurel nodded, exhausted but determined. The shepherd bumped her hand with his nose, and she scratched behind his ears. "Thank you," she whispered to both of them. "I don't think I could face this alone." The mountain sunset painted the clinic's scorched walls in shades of gold and shadow. Somewhere in the distance, an emergency vehicle's siren wailed, heading toward the hospital where Tom Wesley fought for his life. The pressure to sell would only increase, Laurel knew. But with a loyal dog at her side and at least one honest cop in her corner, she felt ready to stand her ground. The shepherd's alertness never wavered as darkness fell. He had appointed himself her guardian, and his every rigid muscle and attentive ear told her that the danger was far from over. Whatever forces were at work to claim her land, they hadn't counted on the protective instincts of one determined dog, or the stubborn resolve of the woman who had once saved his life. The morning after the fire, Laurel sat cross-legged on her living room floor, surrounded by singed intake files she'd managed to salvage. The shepherd lay beside her, his chin resting on her knee as she flipped through water-damaged pages. Her fingers trembled slightly as she found what she was looking for, the original intake form from that sleeting November night. "Look at this," she murmured, smoothing the wrinkled paper. The shepherd's ears twitched forward at her voice. "When I first scanned your chip, it showed as wiped, but there's still a batch number." She typed the sequence into her laptop, accessing the manufacturer's database. The search returned a bulk order. 50 chips, purchased 18 months ago by Crowell Quarry's security division. Laurel's breath caught in her throat. "This can't be coincidence," she whispered. The shepherd lifted his head, amber eyes intent on her face. She remembered how he'd appeared that night, battered and scarred, as if he'd survived something violent, something like an explosion. Her phone buzzed. Calder. "Can you meet me at the diner?" he asked without preamble. "Bring those old case files you mentioned." 20 minutes later, they sat in a corner booth, speaking in low voices, while the shepherd watched the door. Calder spread out a timeline he'd constructed, pointing to highlighted dates. "See these quarry incidents?" His finger traced a pattern. Equipment failures, small fires, unexplained accidents, all concentrated in the months before your clinic fire. And look at the dates of the other recent fires in properties Crowell eventually bought. Laurel leaned closer, her coffee growing cold. "They overlap perfectly." "Exactly. And each time the properties sold within weeks of the incidents." Calder's jaw tightened. "Now about that chip number." She told him about the Crowell Quarry connection. Calder's expression darkened. "That dog wasn't just some stray. He belonged to someone connected to all this." The shepherd's head snapped up, his attention fixing on someone entering the diner. was Jack Morrison, the retired fire chief whose cattle dog Laurel had saved from snakebite last summer. She waved him over. "Heard about the clinic," Jack said, sliding into their booth. "Nasty business. Reminded me of some other fires I've seen, ones that burned too hot, too fast for normal accidents." Laurel exchanged glances with Calder. "We could use your expertise, Jack, off the record." The old fire chief studied them both, then nodded slowly. "I owe you for saving Blue. What do you need?" While they talked, another potential ally approached. Mike Reeves, a rail worker who'd brought his daughter's injured rabbit to Laurel last spring. He'd overheard them discussing the fires. "Been seeing some strange activity near the old fuel depot," Mike offered quietly. "Night deliveries, unmarked trucks, nothing that looks official." "Would you be willing to keep watching?" Calder asked. "Document what you see?" Mike nodded. "Least I can do. That rabbit meant everything to my little girl." As their impromptu meeting broke up, Laurel noticed how the shepherd's behavior changed when a truck backfired outside. His whole body tensed, nose working the air. She'd seen similar reactions during thunderstorms, and yesterday when he'd caught traces of solvent smell near the clinic's ruins. "I think he's had specialized training," she told Calder as they walked back to her car. "The way he responds to certain sounds and smells, it's not standard canine work." Calder watched the dog's alert posture. "Could be explosives detection. Would explain why he knew about the device in your clinic before it went off." They gathered in Laurel's backyard that afternoon, where the shepherd still picked up traces of whatever accelerant the arsonists had used. The dog's nose worked the ground in practiced patterns, his training evident in every measured movement. "If he can follow any remaining scent trail," Laurel said, "it might lead us to where they staged their supplies." "Carefully," Calder warned. "We don't want to tip our hand. These people have already shown they're willing to hurt anyone who gets in their way." The shepherd looked up at them, his scarred flank a reminder of whatever violence he'd survived before finding Laurel. His past was no longer just a mystery. It was a thread that connected directly to the forces threatening them now. Laurel knelt beside him, running her hands over his powerful shoulders. "You knew, didn't you? That's why you came back that night." The dog pressed against her legs, his presence solid and reassuring. They made plans to conduct their investigation quietly, building evidence through Jack's fire expertise and Mike's observations while following the shepherd's nose. The dog's specialized skills could be their key to unraveling the whole conspiracy, if they could stay safe long enough to piece it all together. The evening air held a bite of autumn chill as Laurel and Calder made their way through the clinic's wreckage. The shepherd moved with purpose, his nose working the ground in methodical sweeps. Floodlights cast harsh shadows across the debris while forensics completed their final sweep. "You're sure about this?" Calder asked, checking his flashlight beam. "Once we cross onto Crowell land, we're in different territory." Laurel nodded, watching the shepherd's focused movements. "He's picked up something. Look at how deliberate his tracking is. This isn't random." The dog paused, head lifting to test the air before moving toward a narrow path between properties. His training showed in every precise movement as he followed an invisible trail through brambles and brush. They picked their way carefully behind him, documenting the route with photos and GPS markers. The path wound through shadowy easements, past tangles of wild raspberry and stubborn mountain laurel. After 20 minutes of careful progress, the shepherd led them to a clearing where a massive stone loader sat abandoned, its rusted bulk dark against the starlit sky. "Wait." Calder held up a hand, scanning the area before proceeding. "Let me check it first." The loader's huge hopper gaped like an open mouth, decades of weather wearing its metal to dull patches. But around its base, fresh boot prints marked the mud. The shepherd circled the prints, his nose confirming what their eyes could see. Someone had been here recently. "Look at this." Laurel crouched, pointing her light at dark stains on the concrete pad. "Chemical residue. Same smell as what was left at the clinic." Calder took photos while Laurel collected samples in evidence bags. The shepherd stayed alert, moving between them and the shadows beyond the clearing. They worked quickly, knowing they were exposed. The next morning, Laurel noticed the truck first, dark blue, unmarked, keeping 3 cars back as she drove to check on boarding patients. It followed her to the grocery store, to the bank, to her temporary office space. Always there, always watching. She called Calder. "They're tailing me now. Dark blue pickup, tinted windows." "Crowell's people," he confirmed grimly. "They know we were out there last night. Be careful. Don't go anywhere alone." The warning proved prescient. That afternoon, Harlan Deeks appeared at her temporary office, his artificial smile barely masking his satisfaction as he slapped down a thick folder of documents. "I'm afraid there are some irregularities we need to address," he said, perspiration beading his forehead despite the cool air. "First, regarding the German shepherd currently in your possession." Laurel felt her stomach tighten as he pulled out an official-looking form. "The dog is county property," Deeks continued. "All strays fall under shelter jurisdiction. He needs to be returned immediately for proper assessment and placement." "He's already placed," Laurel countered, "with the sheriff's K-9 unit." "That arrangement was temporary and unauthorized." Deeks's smile widened. "We have concerns about his temperament and training history. For public safety, he needs to be properly evaluated." She knew what that meant. Once in Deeks's custody, the shepherd would disappear. "He's not going anywhere," she said firmly. "He's not a stray anymore, and you know it." "That's not your decision to make." Deeks pulled out more papers. "Which brings us to the second matter. Given the recent fire and questions about controlled substance storage, we're suspending your clinic license pending full investigation." The blow landed hard. Without her license, she couldn't practice, couldn't write prescriptions, couldn't maintain her remaining client base. "You can't do this," she protested. "Those storage violations were caused by your people's bomb." "Careful, Dr. Keating." Deeks's voice held warning. "That's a serious accusation without proof. I'd hate to see your professional reputation further damaged by unfounded conspiracy theories." Within hours, her suppliers began calling. Credit accounts frozen, orders canceled, deliveries suspended pending resolution of licensing issues. The whispers spread through the small community. Maybe she'd been careless with controls. Maybe there were reasons for the investigation. Maybe her judgment wasn't reliable anymore. When Calder arrived that evening, he found her sitting in her darkened living room, the shepherd's head in her lap. "They're trying to isolate you," he said quietly. "Cut off your support, your credibility, your ability to fight back. Classic pressure tactics. They want him." Laurel stroked the dog's ears. "They know he can lead us to proof, so they're using bureaucracy to take him and discredit me at the same time." "We need to be smart about this," Calder warned. "They're playing hardball now. If we push too hard, too fast, they might decide on more permanent solutions." "I won't let them take him." Her voice was steel. "He saved my life. He trusted me when he was hurt and scared. I won't betray that trust." The shepherd lifted his head, amber eyes moving between them. His loyalty had already cost him once. The scars on his flank proved that. But he pressed closer to Laurel, his choice clear. "Then we do this carefully," Calder said. "Document everything. Build our case quietly. I'll talk to some people I trust in the department. See what we can learn about Crowell's security division and their connection to the dog." "And I'll fight Deeks's paperwork," Laurel added. "He may have the forms, but I have records showing the shepherd's service work, his training evaluations, his importance to ongoing investigations. We're not giving up. The dark truck cruised past her house again, a reminder that they were being watched. But Laurel stood her ground, one hand buried in the shepherd's thick fur. They'd tried to break her with bureaucracy and whispers, tried to isolate her from the one witness who could expose their whole operation. They'd failed. The dog shifted, positioning himself between her and the window, his posture alert but calm. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Laurel sat cross-legged on her living room floor, surrounded by scattered medical files and intake records. The shepherd dozed nearby, his ears twitching at every small sound from outside. She'd been studying his reactions for days now, noting patterns that had seemed random at first, but were starting to form a clearer picture. "It's not just gasoline that sets you off, is it?" she murmured, reaching for her original surgical notes from the night she'd found him. The dog's ears perked up at her voice. Earlier that day, while cleaning her temporary clinic space, she'd noticed his distinct alertness when she opened a new bottle of medical-grade solvent. Not the usual tension he showed around ordinary accelerants, but a specific, almost programmed response. His posture had changed, head lowering, nostrils flaring in a trained indication pattern. She spread out the intake photos, studying the blast damage that had scarred his flank. The shrapnel pattern had always bothered her. It wasn't consistent with the typical debris you'd see from a random explosion. These were uniform pieces, industrial grade, arranged in a spray pattern that suggested careful placement rather than accident. Her hands trembled as she opened her laptop, typing in a search for recent accidents at Crowell Quarry. The results loaded slowly, and her breath caught as she found what she was looking for. A report from 14 months ago, 6 months after she'd rescued the shepherd. The article detailed a tragic, industrial accident that had claimed the life of Lydia Crowell, wife of quarry owner Baxter Crowell. "Equipment malfunction during routine maintenance," Laurel read aloud, her voice tight. "Mrs. Crowell was inspecting safety protocols when a blasting cap detonated prematurely." She looked at the shepherd, who had raised his head, eyes fixed on her face. "You were there, weren't you? You were her dog." The pieces clicked into place with terrible clarity. The industrial solvent mentioned in the accident report, the same type that triggered the shepherd's alert response, was commonly used to clean blasting caps. The shrapnel pattern in his wounds matched the type of explosives used in quarry work. And the timing. She pulled up another file, this one showing the batch number from the shepherd's erased microchip. The purchase order had come from Crowell Quarry's security division 2 years earlier, when Lydia was still alive. The dog had been trained as her personal protection animal. "Oh God," Laurel whispered. The shepherd moved to her side, pressing against her leg as if offering comfort. "It wasn't an accident at all, was it? You were there to protect her, and someone made sure you couldn't." Her hands shook as she dialed Calder's number. He answered on the second ring. "Can you come over?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "I found something big." 20 minutes later, Calder sat at her kitchen table, examining the evidence she'd laid out. His face grew grimmer with each document he reviewed. "The timing fits," he said finally. Lydia Crowell had been asking questions about safety violations, environmental impact reports that didn't add up. There were rumors she was gathering evidence, but nothing concrete ever surfaced. "Because she was killed before she could expose whatever she'd found," Laurel said. "And her protection dog, the one witness who might have revealed something was wrong, was deliberately injured and dumped miles from the quarry." The shepherd moved between them, his attention focused on the photos of Lydia Crowell. There was recognition in his stance, a subtle shift that spoke of memory and loss. "Look at his reaction," Laurel pointed out. He knows her. And that solvent response. He was trained to alert to quarry materials, probably part of Lydia's safety protocols, since she was involved in inspections. Calder nodded slowly, his law enforcement training engaging with the theory not as speculation, but as a legitimate homicide lead. The blast that injured him was meant to kill, just like the one that took Lydia. Someone wanted both of them gone. And now that he's resurfaced and helped expose the arson pattern, Laurel's voice trailed off. He's a liability again, Calder finished. That's why Deeks is so desperate to get him into custody. A trained protection dog who can identify specific quarry materials and probably recognize the people involved. He's a walking piece of evidence. Laurel gathered the documents, organizing them with shaking hands. So what do? We can't prove any of this without accessing quarry records, accident reports, security logs from the day Lydia died, Calder said, and testing the Shepherd's response to specific materials and people under controlled conditions. He looked at the dog thoughtfully. We'll need to be careful. If Crowell realizes we've made this connection, he'll move against us more directly, Laurel finished. The Shepherd pressed closer to her side, his training asserting itself in subtle ways, positioning himself between her and the windows, maintaining sight lines to the doors. I'll start quiet inquiries, Calder said. There are still some honest cops in the department, people who questioned Lydia's death but couldn't prove anything wrong. And we'll need to document every alert response he shows, build a record that can't be dismissed as coincidence. Laurel ran her hand along the Shepherd's scarred flank, feeling the evidence of his loyalty beneath her fingers. He had tried to save Lydia, had nearly died in the attempt. Now he was trying to protect her, warning her of danger, leading them toward a truth someone had killed to conceal. We'll be careful, she promised both Calder and the dog. But we're not backing down. Lydia deserves justice, and so does he. The Shepherd's amber eyes met hers, clear and steady. He had chosen his path the night he appeared at her clinic door, bleeding but determined. Whatever came next, they would face it together, following the trail of evidence toward a truth that could no longer stay buried. The evening sky turned dusky purple as Laurel crouched behind her truck, watching Deeks's county vehicle in the clinic's parking lot. Her hands trembled slightly as she held the tiny GPS tracker. Calder had sourced it through trusted contacts, making sure it couldn't be traced back to them. Remember, Calder whispered from beside her, wait until he goes inside for his inspection. Quick and clean, under the rear wheel well. Laurel nodded, her heart pounding. The Shepherd lay silent beside them, his amber eyes fixed on Deeks's truck. When the shelter director finally lumbered inside, clipboard in hand, Laurel moved. She kept low, scurrying across the gravel. The magnetic tracker clicked softly as she pressed it into place. 20 seconds later, she was back behind cover, breathing hard. Done, she whispered. They waited 3 more hours in Calder's unmarked car, watching the tracker's signal on his phone. As night settled fully, Deeks's dot finally began to move. He's heading east, Calder noted, starting the engine. Toward the old rail depot. They followed at a distance, headlights off, guided by the GPS signal. The Shepherd sat alert in the back seat, his posture growing more rigid as they approached the industrial zone. The retired fire chief, Jim Cooper, was already in position when they arrived. His pickup was hidden behind a defunct loading dock, offering a clear view of the depot's main yard. 2 vehicles went in 10 minutes ago, he reported over their secure radio. Box truck and a quarry pickup. They're unloading something near the west storage tanks. Laurel checked her camera settings while Calder distributed the earpieces. The Shepherd's ears pricked forward, his nose working the air currents. You smell it, don't you? Laurel murmured. The solvent. They moved in careful stages, using shadows and rusted equipment for cover. The depot's security lights had long since failed, leaving most of the compound in darkness. Perfect for covert operations, both legal and illegal. The first whiff of chemical hit Laurel's nose as they neared the western section. The shepherd's reaction was immediate, the same alert posture he'd shown at the clinic fire scene. Calder gestured them behind a stack of empty drums. There, in the loading bay, pallets of industrial containers. Even in the dim light, Laurel could make out the hazard symbols, the same solvent used to clean blasting caps at the quarry. "Jim," Calder whispered into his radio. "Any movement?" "All clear. They're in the office, probably doing paperwork." Laurel raised her camera, using the night vision setting. The first shots captured the overall scene. Pallets, truck positioning, general layout. Then she moved closer, focusing on specific details. The shipping labels were clear in her viewfinder. Crowell Quarry Operations, lot number 8732. She photographed every angle, every identifying mark. Next to the pallet sat a stack of county forms, carelessly left in plain view. Inventory transfer documents with Deeks' signature clearly visible. "Gotcha," she breathed. The shepherd suddenly stiffened, a low rumble in his throat. Calder grabbed Laurel's arm, pulling her back into deeper shadow. Footsteps approached. 2 sets, moving casually. "Need to move this batch tonight," a voice drifted over. "Boss wants it gone before the insurance adjusters show up tomorrow." "Same drill as last time?" A second voice, younger. "Yeah. Mark it as disposed in the county system. Deliver it to the North Quarry entrance. They'll handle distribution from there." Laurel's camera clicked steadily, capturing the men's profiles as they passed under a security light. More evidence, more connections. They waited until the footsteps faded, then began their careful retreat. The shepherd moved ahead of them, checking each corner, each shadow. His training was evident in every silent step. Back at the vehicles, Jim's weathered face broke into a grim smile. "Got what you needed?" "More than we hoped," Calder said. "Chain of custody from quarry to county to illegal storage, plus visual confirmation of players involved." Laurel was already reviewing the images on her camera's display. Shipping labels, lot numbers, dated forms, faces, a solid line of evidence connecting Deeks' office directly to materials from the week Lydia died. "Look at this date," she said, showing Calder one of the forms. These solvent containers were logged into county inventory 3 days before Lydia's death, then marked as disposed 2 days after. The shepherd pressed against her leg, his body tense but controlled. He'd done his part, confirming the chemical signature, leading them to truth through scent and memory. "We need to secure these images," Calder said. "Multiple copies, different locations. If this gets to the right prosecutor..." "It's enough to start an official investigation," Laurel finished. For the first time since the clinic fire, real hope flared in her chest. They had proof, tangible, documented proof of the connection between Deeks, the quarry, and the materials that had killed Lydia Crowell. Jim insisted on following them back to town, watching their 6 for any tail. The shepherd remained alert until they reached Laurel's driveway, only relaxing when they were safely inside. As Laurel uploaded the photos to secure cloud storage, she looked at the dog who had started all this, the loyal protector who had survived death to expose truth. "We're getting closer," she told him softly. "We're going to finish what Lydia started." The shepherd's amber eyes held hers, wise and determined. Whatever came next, they had taken the first real step toward justice. The evidence was safe, the connections documented. Now they just had to get it to people who could act on it. The victory was short-lived. They had barely made it halfway back to their vehicles when shadows detached from the darkness. 3 men emerged, blocking their path to escape. The metallic click of a safety being switched off echoed in the night air. "Up on the catwalk," a gravelly voice ordered. "Now!" Laurel felt Calder's hand brush her arm, urging her to comply. The shepherd's muscles bunched beneath his fur, but he stayed close to her side as they climbed the metal stairs. Their footsteps rang hollow on the grating. Suspended above the depot's storage tanks, Laurel's heart hammered against her ribs. The camera felt heavy in her jacket pocket. Their evidence, their hope, now a deadly weight. "The photos," one man demanded, holding out his hand, "and whatever else you took." Before anyone could move, Calder launched himself at the nearest attacker. The clash of bodies against metal rang out like a bell. The shepherd sprang into action, his powerful jaws clamping down on another man's arm as he raised a gun toward Laurel. The third attacker slammed his shoulder into Calder, driving him hard against the railing. Metal groaned. Bolts, weakened by years of rust and weather, began to give way. Calder teetered backward, arms windmilling as the railing separated from the catwalk. "Calder!" Laurel screamed. She lunged forward, grabbing his jacket just as he started to fall. His weight nearly pulled her over, too, but she planted her feet and held on. A gunshot cracked through the air. The bullet struck metal, sending sparks showering down toward the tanks below. The shepherd released his target and hurled himself at the shooter, driving him back. But the damage was done. The sparks found fuel vapors rising from a poorly sealed tank. With every ounce of strength she had, Laurel hauled backward. Calder scrambled up, his boots finding purchase on the grating. "Run!" he shouted, shoving her toward the stairs. Fire raced along the catwalk rails, feeding on years of collected oil and grime. The heat hit them in a wave as they pelted down the metal steps, the shepherd right behind them. They had barely cleared the structure when the first tank exploded. The blast threw them forward onto the gravel. More explosions followed, each one larger than the last. The camera in Laurel's pocket, with all their carefully gathered evidence, was crushed in the fall. Sirens pierced the night. Through ringing ears, Laurel heard vehicles approaching fast. The shepherd pressed against her legs, his hackles raised as headlights swept the yard. Harlan Deeks stepped out of a county vehicle, his face a mask of official concern. 2 animal control officers flanked him, catch poles ready. "What a mess," Deeks said, shaking his head. "Breaking and entering, destruction of county property, reckless endangerment." Hyde clicked his tongue. "And using a county K-9 unit without authorization. That's a serious liability issue." "This is a setup and you know it," Laurel snarled, but her voice shook. Everything they'd discovered, every piece of evidence linking Deeks to Crowell, was gone in the inferno behind them. "The dog," Deeks said to his officers. "Now." The shepherd growled as they approached with the catch poles. Laurel tried to step between them, but Calder held her back. Fighting would only make things worse. "You can't take him," she pleaded. "He's not yours to take." "County ordinance is very clear," Deeks replied smoothly. "As shelter director, I have authority to impound any animal involved in a public safety incident, especially one already listed as county property." The catch poles snapped around the shepherd's neck. He didn't fight. His training ran too deep. But his eyes never left Laurel's face as they led him away. The look of betrayal in those amber depths broke something inside her. Fire crews arrived, focusing on containing the blaze. Police cars pulled up. Laurel watched numbly as Deeks worked the scene, spinning his version of events. She could see her own fate taking shape in the officials' faces. The rogue vet, the troublemaker, now turned dangerous vigilante. "We'll fight this," Calder murmured, but they both knew how it looked. No evidence, no witnesses except a retired fire chief who'd been blocks away. And now, no shepherd, the one being who had never doubted her, never wavered in his loyalty. Laurel stared at the burning depot, watching their chances of exposing the truth disappear in the flames. She had never felt so alone, so utterly defeated. Everything they'd worked for, everything they'd risked, had just gone up in smoke. The morning after the depot explosion, Laurel sat at her kitchen table, staring into a cold cup of coffee. Her hands still smelled like smoke. The weight of failure pressed down on her shoulders until a knock at the door made her jump. Marcus Chen, a rail worker she'd treated after a yard accident last winter, stood on her porch. His eyes darted nervously as he thrust a small hard drive into her hands. "Switchhouse camera 14, he whispered. "Points right at the depot loading zone. Coverage from 6 months back, including the week." He swallowed. "The week Mrs. Crowell died. Never got wiped because it's on the old system." Laurel's hands trembled as she held the drive. "Marcus, this could put you at risk." He shrugged. "You saved my hand when others said to amputate. Figure I owe you one." He hurried away before she could thank him properly. Within the hour, Calder arrived. They huddled over her laptop, watching grainy footage of Crowell's trucks loading pallets of solvent under cover of darkness. The timestamps matched perfectly with the week of Lydia's death. "It's not just about the clinic anymore," Calder said quietly. "This is premeditated murder." Laurel nodded, her mind racing. But Crowell's too smart to leave evidence lying around his office. He'll have anything incriminating stored somewhere secure. "Somewhere off the network," Calder agreed. "Away from digital traces." His eyes lit up. "The dynamite shed." "The what?" "At the quarry's edge. ATF regulations require blast materials to be stored separately. No network connections allowed. Everything's on paper. Perfect place to hide sensitive files." They spent the afternoon drafting legal documents with help from a prosecutor friend of Calder's. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. File an injunction demanding preservation of all quarry records related to chemical purchases and blast protocols. "When Crowell gets served, his first move will be securing whatever could hurt him," Calder explained. "He'll head straight for that shed." Laurel felt hope stirring for the first time since losing the shepherd. "And we'll be waiting." They left at 4 a.m, while stars still dotted the sky. The retired fire chief, Jim Rawlins, set up in his truck at a turnout with clear sight lines to the quarry entrance. If things went wrong, one call from him would bring every emergency responder in 3 counties. "Stay safe, you two," he growled over the radio. "And if that dog shows up, bring him home." Laurel's throat tightened at the mention of the shepherd. She missed his steady presence, his unwavering loyalty. "We will." They found a watching position in dense brush above the dynamite shed. The sun began to paint the eastern sky in pale gold. Laurel checked her watch. The injunction would be served at 8 o'clock sharp. "No more running," she whispered, more to herself than to Calder. "Whatever happens next, we face it head on." He squeezed her hand briefly. Together. They settled in to wait, the video evidence secure in Laurel's pack, their bodies tense with anticipation. The quarry stirred to life as dawn broke fully across the ridge. Somewhere in the growing light, justice waited. The sun had barely crested the ridge when 2 vehicles crunched across the gravel, Crowell's black SUV followed by Deeks's county truck. Laurel's heart hammered as she watched them park near the dynamite shed's steel door. "Right on schedule," Calder whispered from his position behind a stack of equipment crates. Crowell emerged first, his expensive suit out of place among the quarry dust. Deeks stumbled after him, sweating despite the cool morning air. They disappeared inside the shed, and moments later, light spilled from its narrow windows. Laurel gripped the injunction papers, took a deep breath, and stepped out from cover. Her boots crunched on gravel as she approached the shed's entrance. The sound of frantic paper shuffling filtered through the partially open door. "Mr. Crowell," she called out clearly, "I have a court order regarding preservation of records." The shuffling stopped. Crowell appeared in the doorway, his face twisted with rage. But before he could speak, a familiar bark split the air. The German Shepherd burst from the tree line, fur matted with blood from wire fence cuts, but moving with fierce determination. He skidded to a stop at Laurel's side, body rigid with protective intent. "You!" Crowell snarled, reaching inside his jacket. Everything happened at once. Calder emerged from cover, weapon drawn. Deeks lunged for a stack of crates. The shepherd's growl rose to a fever pitch as Crowell's hand emerged with a pistol. The dog launched himself at Crowell just as the gun discharged. The bullet struck a box of blasting caps, triggering a controlled but violent explosion that shook the shed's foundation. The blast wave knocked them all back as the side tunnel entrance collapsed in a shower of rock and timber, sealing Deeks inside. The shepherd recovered first, pinning Crowell while Laurel scrambled to her feet. Calder kicked the fallen pistol away and cuffed Crowell's hands behind his back. "Deeks," Laurel called toward the collapsed tunnel. A muffled groan answered. "He's alive," Calder confirmed, checking through a gap in the rubble. "Trapped, but breathing." Sirens wailed in the distance. Jim Rollins had called it in the moment he heard the explosion. Laurel retrieved her backup drive from her pack, securing the evidence that would tie everything together. Within minutes, the quarry swarmed with police and rescue crews. They extracted Deeks from the tunnel as detectives collected evidence from the shed, including damning documents Crowell had been trying to destroy. "You'll never prove anything," Crowell spat as officers led him to a cruiser. But he was wrong. Over the following weeks, the evidence mounted. The solvent purchases, the falsified reports, the testimony from workers who'd been paid to stay quiet about Lydia's accident. Murder and arson charges stuck to both Crowell and Deeks. 2 months later, Laurel stood before a judge who officially restored her veterinary license and awarded her permanent custody of the shepherd for his role in cracking the case. The dog sat perfectly at attention beside her, as if he knew the significance of the moment. That evening, as sunset painted the ridge in amber light, Calder found her at the cleared site of her old clinic. The shepherd dozed nearby, finally at peace. "I've been thinking," Calder said, taking her hand. "This place needs rebuilding. Not just the clinic, but a life here, together." He squeezed her fingers. "What do you say?" Laurel's free hand found the shepherd's ruff, drawing strength from his solid presence. Looking at Calder, seeing the future in his eyes, she smiled. "Yes. Thank you for watching. Stories like this remind us who we are. If something touched your heart, go ahead and subscribe. I'll be back tomorrow with another story that just might stay with you."